Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for a Twilight webinar on operating agritourism attractions in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. This webinar is hosted by UT Extension in partnership with the Tennessee Department of Agriculture and supported through a grant from the USDA, NIFA, and the Southern Risk Management Education Center. We know that these are strange times, and they have been for a few months now, and we know that these are challenging times for you as farmers and as you prepare to open agritourism operations here this fall. Some of you have been doing some things this summer already, but we want you to know that we are here to support you in every way that we can. So we hope that tonight is a fruitful experience, and hopefully we can get some of your questions answered. We will keep videos turned off and mics muted to help reduce distractions and to increase bandwidth. But we do want you to feel welcome to find that chat box and put any questions that you have anytime in there, and we will be checking that periodically through the session and try to answer some along the way, but we also have a dedicated time at the end to answer those questions. We have several folks who are going to do some speaking tonight on the program. I'm Megan Lefew with the Center for Profitable Agriculture. Mark Morgan will be with us speaking about some of the cleaning and disinfecting procedures. He's with our Department of Food Science, a professor there. Casey Troop is with us from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture and works with agritourism operations across the state in their promotions and other programs. And we are very glad to have Amy Ladd with us of Lucky Ladd Farms. Amy has been operating through the summer in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and has done a lot of research and done a lot of work to figure out how to operate safely, and is very generously here to share some of her experiences and knowledge and resources that she has gained through that experience. Our objective tonight is to help you increase your knowledge of marketing risk associated with COVID-19 and develop goals for implementing new strategies to successfully navigate this new market challenge. We also want you to know that we are educators. We are not lawyers and we are not doctors, so this information is presented for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal or medical advice. You need to contact professionals that are working for your business and for you if you need legal or medical advice. We will be giving some examples of products and services during this presentation, and that is also for informational purposes only and does not constitute an endorsement of those products or services. So we will launch right in here and get started on the presentation. I'm just checking the chat box to make sure there's nothing in there. So we'll go ahead with that. So the market situation is new and different than we have ever experienced before. In the beginning, it seemed to change on a maybe hourly basis, and it continues to change now. Maybe not so quickly, but certainly it is a dynamic situation with a change in number of active cases, government ordinances and orders, mandates, requests, recommendations seem to be changing over time. So that makes it a little bit difficult to know what's going on. And we just have to do the best we can to keep up with the sources of information to make the best decisions we can. There's also a lot of guidance online that was issued early and hasn't been updated or removed when new guidance is presented. So that can be a little bit challenging to know when you're looking what information should you be using to make decisions. We do know in the market that the recommendations is that there will be no field trips for public schools. So that is going to significantly impact the agritourism for fall. Some schools are even altering their calendars and taking out fall breaks, for example, and that could also impact your businesses as well. There are some other market opportunities and challenges. There are some increases in homeschooling and remote learning that could offer some opportunities to provide some special programs for parents and homeschooled children. Families are looking for safe activities close to home, want to get out and do something, want to be outside in particular, and may not want to go so far as to stay overnight somewhere. So they're looking for things close to home. Adults also may be looking for some safe outings. We had an example of this in a call with NAFMA. Some folks were giving some examples of things that they were doing, agritourism operators, and some were doing campfires for families and also date nights. They offered one package for a couple for a date night, and then a double date night, and that was Saunders Farm in Canada. Our spending for families and for people, it is impacted in our decision making because of uncertainty or unemployment. We may not have disposable income, as much disposable income as we did several months ago, and just the uncertainty may make other folks want to hold on to the extra funds that they have. So that could certainly impact spending at our operations. We have seen increased consumer interest in local food products. I think the Pick Your Own folks and the CSA folks this summer, and perhaps farmers markets as well, have seen some increased demand for local foods. Part of that might be it's deemed a safe outing, but we're also, putting our money toward products that are useful to us and make us feel good. Operators and individuals are facing challenges in procuring supplies. We've been trying to find supplies to send for daycare, even just disinfectant wipes, and those things are easier to find, I think a unicorn is easier to find than those right now. And that certainly might be the case for supplies that you might need in cleaning and other things for your business. We also may be looking at some challenges in hiring or maintaining a labor pool. We might have some folks who are at risk that may not be willing to come back this fall. And then we might have some potential for increased absenteeism if people get concerned about their safety or well-being, or use COVID as an excuse not to come to work, or when people are exposed and are needed to quarantine for a time, or unfortunately may have some get sick and need to isolate. So we've got to come up with a plan. You've got to come up with a plan for your business. And in the presentation with NAFMA, I heard 4 different operators speak, and I wrote down some of the words that they used in talking about developing their plans and those that were operating now, and words that were helpful to them during that process. And they were words like be optimistic, be flexible, be nimble, be quick about implementing things when you decide to go a direction. Be clear in your communications with employees and customers. Be safe. Follow recommendations at a minimum and go above and beyond that if you can. Make your employees and customers comfortable. Be trustworthy to your customers and employees. Cleanliness, be clean. So all of those things were words that came to mind, and I wanted to share with you as you begin to develop a plan or continue working on the plan for your business opening this fall. Customer and employee trust is going to be vital. It is up to you to help them feel safe and feel comfortable coming to you. And when customers feel safe and comfortable coming to you, then they're liable to share that with others, that what you were doing made them feel safe, made them feel comfortable, they had a good experience, and recommend other people to come there. Many of our customers are now more interested in their health, safety, and well-being. So your plan needs to revolve around how you can help them through information, messaging that you give them, procedures that you're using, and even the products and services that you're offering. There are several places where there are some guidance that is out there, and sometimes there are some requirements that are out there. As time has evolved, there's been, I think, fewer requirements and more guidance, although there are some counties that have and continue to have mask mandates. But there are lots of requirements from the state of Tennessee, the Centers for Disease Control, IAPA, which is a global attractions association, and of course the local government and health department. So it's important to review that information and to follow those recommendations the best you can at a minimum. These recommendations and guidance cover everything from employee training and employee health checks, and instruct how to come up with a plan in case an employee is sick or has been exposed to COVID, has information about what you should talk about your customers for, about physical or social distancing, keeping 6 feet away, which is really vital, and not allowing more people to come to your operation at a time than can safely socially distance within their or from other family groups, and so some information on cleaning and sanitation as well. So these are some good resources for you. We will be sharing these slides and a fact sheet that has links in it as well for you later, so you don't need to be feverishly writing things down if there's anything of interest. For that, you will have these within the next day or two. So when you're looking to start your plan or working through your plan, I think first you need to really assess your goals and your needs and your family. What needs to happen for you? Is there a big risk within your family group that you need to deal with? I have had one operation decide that they are not opening this fall. The main operator is due to have twins in October, which would be a major challenge in and of itself. But also this extra risk, they have just decided that with schools closed, they don't generate enough weekend traffic to make it worth it for them, the risk worth it for them, so they're not opening. The next step then would be to assess the risks at your operation. What can you safely open following the guidelines? So what can you safely open and physically distance folks at? What can you safely open and effectively keep clean and sanitized? We received lots of questions before this session, and some in particular were related to corn boxes and hay rides. I've seen quite a bit of discussion on NAPA website and other places related to the corn boxes. This is one operation where people are really, or one enterprise that, or attraction that people are really concerned about being able to keep clean enough, depending upon your, the lots of factors, but I don't know how you can keep all those millions of kernels of corn clean and sanitized. Some folks did decide that they're planning to open those, and other folks, that is one thing that they're not opening. Hay rides is another one that we've had questions on. That is one I've heard that there's more people planning to open. There are ways to socially distance depending upon how large your wagon is, how many folks you typically have at your operation at one time or plan to have at your operation at one time. You can socially distance between family groups. And depending upon what your wagon is made of, some surfaces are easier to keep clean and sanitized as well. Amy, do you want to weigh in on this about your operation? Are there any attractions that you've decided not to open, and why, and others you have, and maybe why?
Sure. So we have also opted not to open the corn box this year. Most guests are 100% understanding of that. We do have our wagon ride in operation. Our wagon ride has seats in it, so we are able to mark the seats so that people can take their groups and properly social distance themselves from other groups. And then we have some safety protocols tied to that, like anybody who wants to get on that attraction, we personally sanitize their hands before entering and upon exiting. And then family members or social groups that are there together may sit together, but then we ask that they maintain a 6-foot space in between others. It will be a challenge in the fall, but I also think that demand for that particular attraction has probably declined some, because I think, some folks don't want to wait, though we're pretty good. We haven't had too many people who have had to wait very long, but for the most part, if it's something that they're concerned about, they're just not going to participate in it.
Thank you. I did want to mention another operator had done a survey of their customers, and the corn box was one of those, one of the attractions that had, it seemed like the people were most uncomfortable with that one, as being willing to let their kids play in a corn box or not. I think almost 60% of people who responded to that question indicated that they either would not let their kids play in the corn box, or they really weren't sure about that one. And so that made him decide to keep that enterprise closed, that attraction closed. And that could be helpful to parents if they're uncomfortable having to tell their kids no. If it's just closed, that would certainly make it easier on the parents from a parent standpoint. So once we kind of decide are we opening or not, then what kind of attractions might we open and which ones might we keep closed? We need to look at developing and implementing procedures to reduce our risk. So procedures for cleaning, disinfecting, and sanitizing. Procedures for our employee hand washing, but also hand washing and sanitizing stations throughout the operation. Social or physical distancing. How are we going to have our customers flow through the enterprise? Do we need to change our retail layout, take some things out of our retail areas so that there's more space between? Where do we have lines? How are we going to social distance at lines? Are you going to require pre-purchase tickets and timed arrival times, or are you going to give folks only a certain amount of time at your enterprise? We need to develop procedures or policy related to masks at the operation, whether you're in a mandated location and can rely on some of the county protocol for that, or if you're going to implement your own if you're not in a mandated area. What methods are you going to use to reduce contacts? Online booking or purchases? Are you going to go cashless, or how are you going to handle payments? What are you going to do to change so there's no communal condiments, no drink refills, people aren't filling their own drinks? Anything where there's contact, you've got to work through kind of every touch point that your customer might have and figure out how you can reduce those contacts throughout. Need to work through employee health screening. How are you going to do that to make sure that employees are well before they come to work? And also procedures. What if somebody gets sick at work or a customer falls ill at the operation? How are you going to handle that? What kind of training do your employees need more than usual? And then what kind of communication are you going to use with customers to talk about your protocols and what's new and different at your operation? We also need to have a plan
Megan,
for, oh yes, Amy, please.
would you go back to that one slide? Okay, I just thought it might be helpful if I kind of reviewed some of the things we were doing in relation to that, if that's okay and appropriate at this time.
Absolutely, that would be great.
Okay. So in terms of some of the things, I'm going to go line by line and just give everybody feedback as to what we've done. It's very in the beginning of the planning process, and even still, there's moments of where you just feel overwhelmed. But once you're in it, it's actually not that bad. In terms of cleaning, disinfecting, and sanitizing, we basically just created spreadsheets, and everybody in their areas has assigned times. There's goals for certain items. Maybe countertops are supposed to be wiped upon the hour, and your sneeze guards are supposed to be wiped every 2 hours, and high traffic areas, maybe every 3 hours. So we basically have divided every area across the farm, whether it's playgrounds, concessions, admissions, inside the market, has different sets of spreadsheets. And the people who are working in those areas are required to follow those spreadsheets and at some point in time document and initial that those cleaning and disinfecting procedures have taken place. So that provides a level of accountability on our staff. One thing it also does is it allows our customers to frequently see our staff cleaning, which they very much appreciate. So that's one simple thing you can put into place, is just have your checklist there, hold your staff accountable so that way they're following up with that. In terms of hand washing and sanitizing stations, early on when all of this very first started, we were like, oh goodness, we had to have touch-free hand. Nobody wants to touch anything, and this and that, and then one of the staff members said, is it really that big of a deal? Because one, if you're trying to buy a lot of that type of stuff now, if you haven't already looked into it, you're going to be behind the curve, because most PPE or things that you're going to need in terms of sanitizer or sanitizing stations, or a lot of this stuff is back ordered by a month or two. So a staff member said, is it really that big of a deal if they have to touch the sanitizers? Because as soon as they pump it, they're going to sanitize their hands and it's going to kill whatever germs they touched. So after we thought about it, well, it made sense. Let's try it. It would save us a lot of money. We saved literally thousands of dollars, not on touch-free hand sanitizer stations. But what we did is we put 50 hand sanitizing stations out across the farm. So everywhere you walk within probably 20 to 30 feet, for the most part, you're going to find some sort of sanitizing option. And the pumps, we just have boxes with plastic hand sanitizer pumps in them. People use them. It's a liquid kind. It's not a gel because that's what we could get. We bought it by the barrel, and we bought it locally from Froggy's Fog out of Columbia, Tennessee. So that's Froggy's Fog. In terms of social distancing with your layouts and things of that nature, we basically took our stanchions and our ropes, and instead of putting them at 6 feet, we marked them at 8 feet. That way, because sometimes you're going to have a party where they're going to stand together and take up a little bit extra space. And so the rope has a post at every 8 feet, and there's a sign that reminds them to please keep their distance 6 feet apart. It says, do your part, keep 6 feet apart. And they're just basic signs that we printed off here, laminated, and put on our stanchions, our queue lines. We also marked our floors in our gift shop so that they could see a visual cue as to what about every 6 to 8 feet is in there too on the floor. And then time ticketing has been extremely helpful for getting folks checked in. We take a certain amount every 30 minutes, and that's allowed us to be able to spread the crowd out there so that they're not such a massive line waiting there. Mask protocols, we do have a mask mandate in our county right now. However, as the state guidelines call for, if you are outdoors and you can socially distance, then masks are not required for ages 13 and older, and that's the policy that we follow. There is, at the farm, there is a lot of space where people can easily social distance, and we aren't experiencing large crowds right now. In the fall, it will be a little bit more challenging, but we are still, state mandates require that everybody operates at a 50% capacity. And so even at that, the crowds, if we sell out that day, will still be heavy, but they should still be able to social distance. Let's see, methods to reduce contacts for online booking purchases. So we still take cash on site, but we use, for our online ticketing system, we use Ticket Spice, all one word, Ticket Spice. The reason we chose Ticket Spice is because it has built-in add-ons where you can add on merchandise. So let's say for our Sunflower Festival, if they chose to come a day during our Sunflower Festival, and then when that date is selected, it gave them the option to pre-purchase their sunflowers online. So that's one way we could reduce handling. Currently now, when they are buying their tickets, they can also pre-buy things like animal feed, gem mining, and pony rides, those types of things. So that's specifically why we went with Ticket Spice. We also like the fact that Ticket Spice offers time ticketing. You can set it up if you want it to be in 30-minute increments, 1-hour increments, however much. You can set a capacity max. So there were many reasons for going with Ticket Spice over something like Ticket Leap. Employee health screenings. Currently, we don't have a large staff because our spring and summer seasons are not that big. Sorry, that's Jason sneezing. But we, on site, we, upon arrival, I have an employee assigned. They take everybody's temperature and they ask them the 5 questions. Have you had a sore throat? Have you had a fever? Have you had cough, shortness of breath, loss of taste or smell, vomiting, diarrhea? And so they have to answer those questions before they can go clock in. I haven't had anybody answer yes, so I haven't had to send anybody home. In the fall, we were trying to decide if we are going to continue that or if we're going to have them just have the questions posted and remind them. I do know that some time clock apps, and I'm looking in, I think that the time clock app that I use, which is called 7 Shifts, it offers an upgrade where I could ask the employees that question upon clocking in, and then the employee would be required to take their temperature at home. Again, right now I don't mind taking their temperatures because I only have a handful of staff, but if I gear up to, let's just say 50 or 75 staff, that could be a lot of people that we're coming in extremely close contact with. Not that we don't with everything else we do in our business. Employee training, we've trained employees on, talked to them about how to properly wear a mask, how to properly put your mask on and off, what we expect, physically showed them in terms of sanitation and cleaning and going over those spreadsheets and expectations, and the management team worked together to develop all of that. Customer communication, we have used Facebook probably as our most up to the minute communications, but we also have information posted on our website, and information has gone out in email, and of course we have the signage all over the farm. Incidents response plan, this is kind of still in development. We don't have a B team, so they recommend that most businesses have an A team and a B team. And what that means is group A always works together and group B always works together. Well, right now my staff is too small. So I only have group A. I don't have anybody that if somebody was going to get sick that I could bring in my B team and just have them work double shifts. So we're trying to develop something like that for the fall so that if someone was to get sick, because we will be exposing ourselves to many more employees, that's kind of in process right now that I'm working on, is how will I manage having an A team and a B team so that if somebody from one of the teams gets sick, the other team can step up and take their place. So I hope that helps. I've tried to watch the questions and I think I've answered the question for the time ticketing. But if anybody else has any other questions, if you want to ask me at the end, certainly do so.
Thank you, Amy. That's very helpful. And I didn't quite catch the name of your time clock plan. If you would type that in the chat box, folks may be interested to have that. And the A and B team maybe especially vital. There may be some folks that there may be only one person that knows how to do a key task, and cross training so that somebody else on that other teams knows how to do that key task if somebody were to get sick and be out of commission, at least in self-isolation. But heaven forbid, if somebody were to get severely ill, need to be able to keep going if you can. We had a question come in the registration about what extra costs might we be incurring, and there certainly can be some extra costs. I know Amy talked about several things: staff personal protection equipment, hand washing, hand sanitizing stations for guests, cleaning supplies, staff time to develop the protocols, staff time to clean, to keep records, to communicate with guests is all maybe in addition to what you normally do. Costs for developing that signage and those queue lines for physical distancing and other signage about your new protocols. Maybe a new cost for a new online ticketing system that you haven't used before, among other things. This is also a time when we don't know for sure how long we're going to be in this situation. So we need to be carefully managing finances, reduce expenses where possible, and it may be a good time to delay capital investment until we know when this may turn around and things may open back up more. Amy, do you have anything about costs to add here?
Yeah, so one of the things is the PPE and sanitizer. In the past, we were used to paying, let's say, $7 for a half gallon of sanitizer. On average, a gallon of sanitizer is running about $40. So just be prepared, and you need to be thinking of where you're going to be buying this stuff in bulk now, because most of your cleaning supplies and things, if you're used to shopping at Sam's or getting them from a local store, keep in mind that there are still tons of limitations on, it doesn't matter if you're a business or not, they're still only limiting things to like 1 or 2 per customer. So highly encourage you, if you are used to using Sam's or Costco to stock your businesses, you need to be finding yourself a food service provider or something like that where they can also get access to a lot of these supplies. In terms of the PPE, we have supplied staff with cloth masks, paper masks. I have plastic shields. We've tried everything. Neck gaiters. We've tried everything. Nobody likes anything. So you're just ultimately going to have to make a decision on what you want to do. I have thought about it two ways. One, I can just tell them, hey, I want you to wear a cloth mask, and let them wear whatever they want. But then what happens if that comes back on me and they say, well, they didn't provide me with the proper protection? They put it back on me as the employee. So I took it upon myself to provide those types of things. Gloves, gloves early on, everybody was wearing gloves, and then they stopped wearing gloves because gloves transmit it. But food service is still supposed to, for the most part, wear gloves. So just all of those types of things. And then in terms of reducing expenses, if you haven't shopped or prepared, been looking into what your expenses are going to be for the cleaning supplies, food, things like that for the fall, expect what I would consider a significant price increase. I think we've had prices go up probably at least twice, if not 3 times over just since March from our service providers. So be considering all of that, because we ultimately had to increase our prices here when it came to food because of those types of issues.
Amy, are you offering a similar menu as last year, or are you reducing the options on your menu?
So we have offered the same menu that we offered last year. We've actually probably increased it. The increase is more related to the fact that we started offering our online produce, and we were doing some curbside food service and still offering some of those. So that kind of expanded our menu a little bit. But in terms of food service, for us, it's other than the cost going up, that has not been a major deal. And I know of lots of people who are reducing their menus, and the reason that they are reducing their menus is because they feel like that they will flip their lines faster, and I certainly understand that. We've thought about playing with online ordering and pickup, through our Square POS system. But I think that our crowd is going to be too large for us to be able to effectively do that on site. Works fine for if we just, had, 100, 200 people here, but certainly not when you get into the thousands of people.
I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I'm having a nice conversation here. I was going to ask you about what your expectations are for crowds this fall. That was a question that came through. Based on your experience this summer, do you have an idea what to expect for crowds? Will they be normal, a lot less, a lot more? Do you have any feeling whatsoever?
I think it's a tough call. Our daily foot traffic is up, but we never in the spring and summer reach crowds like we have in the fall, right? And people associate the farm being extremely busy in the fall. Um, so I think it's a bit unknown. I do know that we have done now, I think it's 3 events here at the farm across the summer: Watermelon Festival, Splashproof, and our kids construction event. And 2 of the 3 events performed at 50% as to what they would normally be. And that has nothing to do with us reducing capacity, because the reduced facility capacity still would have been larger than what those groups events normally perform at. So we weren't really having to reduce anything for those events, if that makes sense. And when the numbers came in, the events were performing at about 50% as to what they were normally do, for 2 of the 3. The third one was right at about even with what it had done in the past. So daily foot traffic is up. However, when people are associating large crowds, if you have that history of the large crowd, then I feel like that probably you should expect the numbers to be less.
That makes sense. Although it's really not a fair question, because if we had a crystal ball, we would use it, right? It's just so hard to know.
Yeah.
But your
100%.
experience and thoughts are certainly valuable there. Well, we had several questions about liability, so we're going to go through some information here. Businesses have a duty to take reasonable measures or due care to provide a safe environment for customers and employees. So it's really important to follow applicable public health guidance, even if it's not a requirement. Those recommendations are really going to help you to prove that you did what you could to keep people safe. Several operations on the NAPMA call said that we are using those as minimums, and we're going above and beyond that because we want our customers to see that we are trying to do our absolute best to keep everybody safe. Develop a written plan for some of these protocols and procedures, and keep and maintain records of how you're implementing those, so that that you can prove that you took reasonable measures and do care to take care of your customers and employees. We've had several questions over the last several months related to liability insurance and whether it covers or not. First of all, read your policy, talk to your agent, but also make them show you in the policy where the wording is so you can see the wording for yourself. I have spoken with, through email, one of the insurers in the state, and that insurer said that many farm and commercial liability policies exclude liability for the transmission or exposure to a communicable disease such as COVID-19. So that is not covered. Policies do more often include liability coverage for injury, physical injury caused by bacteria, parasite, or other organism contained in food products, but that's not COVID-19. But be sure on both of these things to discuss with your agent and ask them to point you to the wording in the policy so that you can read it and understand what you're covered for and what you're not. If it's excluded, you're probably not going to be able to find coverage that does include it for the transmission or exposure, especially right now. And if you did, you probably couldn't afford it. But just understanding what you're covered for and not under insurance is important. We had a question about whether the operation should have every customer come through sign a waiver. And in case we have people from different states, I'm not sure that we do, but this is really dependent on state law and state case law. What I found is that, and again, I'm not an attorney here, I'm an educator, but what we've been told in the past when we've discussed liability and what I can find now is that waivers are good at documenting that the customer has been warned of a risk that's out there. It does not absolve you of gross negligence or and it may not hold up in court, because if you are making somebody sign a waiver before they do something, then, you know, they really don't have any bargaining power in that. And so oftentimes those do not hold up in court. You should discuss this with your attorney if you're considering having a waiver, and get your attorney to draft the language for that waiver for you. There are a couple of attractions that I'm missing one, that have warnings that pop up when you visit their websites. This is a warning regarding COVID-19 that I pulled from the Dollywood Parks and Resorts website today, basically saying that interaction with the general public poses an inherent risk of COVID-19, that it's a contagious disease that can cause illness and death, and that by visiting Dollywood, you voluntarily assume all the risks related to exposure. There was also another one on the Disney parks website as well, similar to that. So some folks are implementing those. I don't know the, you know, the validity of those or how much they help, but it was something to also perhaps discuss with your attorney. But those are things that we're seeing maybe more often. The governor of Tennessee did call a special legislative session that's supposed to begin Monday. And part of the reason for calling that was so that the legislature could address COVID-19 liability protections for businesses, schools, and nonprofits. So we don't know exactly what that will look like and if they can get something through or not. If they do get something through, though, there's no way that it will absolve anyone of gross negligence or willful misconduct. So you've still got to be, you know, taking care of your customers and documenting the procedures that you're using. Amy, did you have anything that you would like to add about liability before we change topics?
No, I think the only thing we've done in terms of that is we've also added it to our website. When you purchase when you purchase tickets online, that was another thing that I liked about Ticket Spice was they had to sign verifying they had read the terms and conditions, and we have the COVID disclosure, something almost verbatim to that, and Ticket Spice saves that signature for you that they verified and read. It actually won't even allow them to purchase the tickets. We still do, even though we say you're supposed to buy tickets online, we'll have a handful. It varies. I wish I could give you a hard and fast average. Some weeks we average maybe about 10% over. Some weeks it's 25% over. It's not a significant number, but we do still have some that walk up to the window. And for those, we have a pretty significant signage next to the window that disclaims our terms and conditions, which we call a health pledge. So
that's a great way to put it. Okay, Mark Morgan is a professor in our Department of Food Science, and he is going to share some information that hopefully will be really helpful about cleaning and types of products for cleaning, and maybe where we can get some of those.
Great, thanks, Megan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Well, good evening, everyone. Let me just spend a few minutes talking about the basics of cleaning, disinfecting, and sanitizing. I assume everyone who has some sort of a food service operation is very familiar with sanitizing, but we'll go through just a few of these slides just to really make sure that you're doing the right things and you're doing things right. Two separate ways to look at it. So cleaning really is just removing a lot of the dust and debris, and it will remove a lot of the bacteria and viruses by scrubbing and washing. So that is the important first step for any disinfection or sanitizing process. Sanitizing is really used on food contact surfaces and other surfaces where you're just trying to reduce the number of bacteria on those surfaces. Whereas disinfecting really destroys and inactivates bacteria and viruses. So sanitizing is really not designed to kill a lot of bacteria or viruses, but we do call it sanitizing for our hands. A lot of these terms are interchangeable, as you'll see on some of the products, and that's why it's misleading. Sometimes they're used in combination, and the basic thing here is that many of the chemicals, the same chemicals, are used as disinfectants and sanitizers. The difference is the concentration or the exposure time on the surface. So we will talk about that. So disinfectants are really the only products approved by EPA to kill viruses on hard surfaces, and all of the ones listed by EPA at the moment are considered disinfectants or at disinfectant concentrations. Okay, so next slide. So the procedures are basically straightforward. You can't disinfect or sanitize a surface that has residue on it. The chemical will react with the residue, and it won't be effective at removing or inactivating the bacteria or viruses. So you really need to clean with some sort of detergent, soap and water. Do a good job of cleaning before you disinfect or sanitize surfaces. And you need to, the key point about whatever sanitizer or disinfectant you choose is that you really need to look at the label instructions. Everything will be there on how to and what surfaces it can be applied to. So what concentrations and what contact times you have to maintain. And we'll look at some examples here. So all of them require a specific concentration, and it really needs to be wet during that contact time. So taking a rag that's soaked in sanitizer and just wiping something, if it doesn't stay wet on that surface, especially outdoors, for the contact time, then it's really not going to be effective as a sanitizer. And so that's part of doing the things right, is making sure that you're meeting that concentration and contact time. So that it's just not show and tell that you're going around looking like you're sanitizing surfaces. You are actually following the right procedures. So some of the chemicals will require a rinse, especially on food contact surfaces, and I'm sure anyone that's serving food already understands a lot of that. So let's look at some more examples here. So for disinfecting for the coronavirus in particular, you need to select a disinfectant that is listed on this EPA List N, and that's effective against SARS-CoV-2 virus in particular. So here's the link, epa.gov/listn. And you can download the entire list, or you can use this new tool that I show here at the bottom that allows you to select the products based on an active ingredient or what type of surface you're using. And this is really a useful tool for things that you may already have. So you may have already bought some sanitizers or are using them, and you want to know, does this work against COVID-19? Well, I'll show you how you can verify that to make sure you're doing the right things by using the right chemicals. Okay, next. So here's one that I pulled out of Publix here locally on the shelf, and Citrus 2 Hospital Germicidal Deodorizing Cleaner. Okay, so this is where the terms get mixed up. They can put different terminology on the package. What this means is that it can also act as a cleaner and a sanitizer or deodorizer. The point I want to show you here is that the EPA registration number will be on every product, and that's what you're going to use to identify whether or not it can work for COVID-19. Most of these labels, probably all of these labels, were printed before we came out with this novel coronavirus, and so you rarely will find it on the label, but EPA's website will tell you by this registration number which ones they have approved for use against COVID-19. The other thing I want to point out on this label is you'll see that this product is made by, it says it's made by Beaumont Products, Inc. And when we look it up, you're not going to find that name. You're also not going to find the name Citrus 2 Hospital Germicidal deodorizing cleaner. So you can't always go by the name of the product to know whether or not it's been approved by EPA. You really need to look at that number. And we're going to just look at the first two numbers, the 1839-83. So on the next slide. So if we go to their website, epa.gov/listn, and click on this listn tool, you can type in the first two numbers from the registration number for any chemical that you have. And if I type in 1839-83, look what pops up at the bottom here. It says its active ingredient is quaternary ammonia. The name of the product is not even what was on the bottle. Detergent disinfectant pump spray. So it is a detergent. It is good for cleaning and disinfecting. Different company, Stefan Company. But here's the important part, that you have to follow the directions that are on the label for canine parvovirus, which means you have to use that concentration for the canine parvovirus. And in this case, it's already a ready-to-use formulation, so there's no mixing involved, but it requires this 10-minute contact time. So if you spray this on a surface, it needs to stay wet for 10 minutes. This may be a challenge if this is a high-touch surface where a lot of people are touching it. You probably don't want to be repeatedly disinfecting surfaces that people are constantly touching during the day. The disinfectant concentrations may be higher than you would want your clientele to be touching regularly. So you may step it down and use a sanitizer in between disinfectant steps. It's up to you, but that's just something to think about, that the disinfectant concentrations, a lot of times people using them as a disinfectant are wearing gloves and things because you don't really want to be getting that on your hands all the time. Next slide. Here's another one, very common, Lysol. You can see that it says right at the top, kills germs for a deep clean. So an all-purpose cleaner. It's a cleaner and a disinfectant. So it cuts through grease, removes soap scum, but it also kills bacteria. If we look closely down here in the blueprint on the bottom of the directions, you can see that there is a sanitizing step. So leave for 10 seconds before wiping to just sanitize. Or to disinfect, you have to leave it for 2 minutes prior to wiping. And then rinse all food contact surfaces with water. So they're saying if you're using this as on a food contact surface, you must rinse it, those food contact surfaces afterwards. You can see the EPA registration number that I copied from the back, 777-66. We could plug that into the same tool and it will tell you, what properties you have to use or what concentration and time you need to use of this material, this chemical, to be effective against the novel coronavirus. You don't see it on the list there on the back, even though you see some other viruses. Next one. So everyone's probably going to move to chlorine, and here is hypochlorite. Look at these two bottles. Are they the same? They look the same. They're very similar, but you'll see on the one on the left, disinfecting bleach. And it says kills 99.9% of germs. A lot of the other wording is very similar. Let's flip it over. Next slide. Notice on the top right, not for sanitization or disinfectant. This is the one, the Splashproof one. So it says to sanitize and disinfect, use Clorox disinfecting bleach. So there are differences in bleach, and that's something you need to think about. The procedure on the bottom left is for the disinfectant. You can see it says 1/3 cup per gallon, and it tells you what surfaces you can do, pre-wash the surfaces before you put the bleach on. And then if we look it up in the website, you're going to see that it tells you how long to leave it in contact. Next slide. So if we look that one up, here was the label on the back, 5813-120. We type that into the EPA website and pops up as sodium hypochlorite, which is a chlorine-based sanitizer disinfectant made by the Clorox company. Again, follow the instructions for preparation for canine parvovirus. In this case, you have to look up on the label how much to mix in dilution and then what contact time. So typically the back of the package may say To sanitize, you need a few tablespoons per gallon. To disinfect, you need a third of a cup per gallon, things like that. So you need to be careful to look at that to make sure that the solution you're using is the right one. Another caveat about sodium hypochlorite is that chlorine is most effective at a low pH. And unfortunately, if I add more bleach to the water, it raises the pH. And this has the interesting caveat that more is not better. So if this says to add a third of a cup to a gallon and you say, oh, I'm going to add a whole cup to a gallon, you may now have made it a mixture that is not effective at killing the virus. Because when you added more of the bleach to that water, it raised the pH, and the chlorine is not as effective at that higher pH. So you really need to pay careful attention to the label and the amounts that they say to use for the concentration. Okay, next.
So Mark, I just want to clarify here to make sure I'm understanding. So when I have a cleaner that I want to use, to know how to mix it properly or use it properly to kill COVID-19, I need to put it in this website, and then it's telling me to follow the disinfection directions and preparations for the following virus. So for this, if I want to use bleach to kill COVID-19, I look at the label for canine parvovirus and follow those directions.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it will tell you which virus or which directions to follow for every one of the chemicals that you have, if they are in this database. So this database has all of the ones approved for COVID-19, novel coronavirus. And so if you type in the number and it doesn't show up, guess what? That one has not been approved by the EPA to be effective for that virus.
Thank you. And if anybody else has a question, please feel free to put it in the chat box and we'll address those.
Okay, since most people are going to use bleach, one thing that you need to look at is that bleach does have an expiration date. It's only good for 1 year from the date of production. So if you have a lot of old bottles of bleach lying around, they may not be any good anymore, especially if they've been opened or kept in warm areas. But there is a number on every bottle, and it typically will tell you things like the year it was manufactured and the day. So this one was manufactured in 2019 on the 337th day, which was December 3rd. And so it expires on December 2nd of 2020. That's an important thing to know, that the bleach may not even be effective if it's too old. Next. The other thing is that if it's been opened and stored in sunlight or higher than 77 degrees Fahrenheit, it will degrade very rapidly. And by the way, the solutions that you mix up will degrade over time. So they're only good for a few hours, and then you need to mix up a new solution to make sure that it is effective, especially if it's outside in the sunlight or warmer temperatures. The third thing is that, bleach must be diluted, especially this kind of bleach, which is typically 7.5% of sodium hypochlorite. You must be diluted and to be safe, so you're not burning people's hands and effective against the virus on the hard surfaces. So definitely follow the label instructions. And typically the CDC and WHO recommend this is a general for any kind of bleach, but 0.12% sodium hypochlorite solution for at least 5 minutes. Has to be wet on the surface for at least 5 minutes. So look carefully at the concentration on the label when you decide how to dilute it. What is the concentration you're starting with? Next. So that's really it for the chemicals, and I think Amy did a really good job of talking about regularly sanitizing with spreadsheets. So I would just echo that that's a good strategy. You have to have some deep disinfecting at least at the beginning and during breaks or in the evening. But during the day, probably sanitizing is the best if it's a high touch area where there's a lot of people touching it. If it's a barrier surface, then you can go ahead and disinfect it, because if you're not expecting people to touch it, that's probably okay. But you just want to make sure that the concentration you're using is effective and you are using the right chemicals.
Mark, we have a question. and you don't have many non-finished wood surfaces in commercial kitchens, I'm assuming, but we do at agritourism operations. How do we disinfect wood surfaces? Do we?
Yeah, so I think the best, if it's a hardwood, it's easier. If it's a softwood like a poplar, it's probably not going to be very effective. I think your best solution is to try the disinfecting bleach and spray it with bleach. People are going to start smelling it because at the concentrations for the disinfectant, you can definitely smell the bleach, the chlorine. That's the only solution I have. I don't. As a food scientist, I would say you can't disinfect wood surfaces. That's why we don't allow them in food processing facilities. But
I was going to add, Megan, sorry, Mark, this is Amy Ladd. The CDC doesn't recommend sanitizing wood surfaces. And I think for the reason that you just stated, so according to CDC guidelines, you're not, it's not recommended to sanitize wood surfaces. We still spray ours with the sanitizer, but I think exactly what you
is. You're not going to be very effective, but you can spray it on there. And hopefully if you spray it on there at a sanitizer concentration where it's not going to hurt someone if they get it on their hands, then maybe it will kill the virus if they get it on their hands, right? It may transfer and then kill it. But
I would use a word of caution about using the bleach concentration for wood surfaces where people are going to be sitting, just because, as you mentioned, the time that stuff has to sit on the surface, and then making sure if you had an employee who was to not properly wipe it off, then you could be bleaching and replacing customers' clothing.
That's a very good point.
And so we learned that lesson, actually not related to COVID, many years ago, and we had to buy some new clothes. And so just as a word of caution, if you are thinking about going the bleach route for your sanitation or disinfectant, whatever word you want to use there, we don't use the bleach for any surfaces that people are going to be sitting on. We choose to use a couple of products. One is Stearamine, and another one is called San Gem. And I don't know that I know how to spell either one of those, but we purchased both of those from our food supplier. One is a ready to use, and one is a tablet that you have to make a concentrate. Both of them have been approved by the EPA for killing the coronavirus. And definitely what you mentioned about your on the Stearamine mixing to the appropriate concentration, and then your sit times. One, I think, has a 1 minute sit time. One has a 4 minute sit time. So it definitely, but it's food safe. So that's why we chose that option, because we felt like it was safer on our tables and things like that. If an employee was to not get everything wiped up, or if it didn't 100% dry, most things we are spraying on and allowing to air dry so that it has the appropriate sit time. But if they were to have somebody eating at a table or something and it hadn't completely dried, that's why we chose the food safe ones.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And so those may be some sort of quaternary ammonia or something that is commonly used in the food industry. Chlorine bleach is also used at sanitizer concentrations on food contact surfaces. So you just need to be careful about the bleaching aspect of people's clothing, and it will damage your hands too if you have someone mixes too high of a concentration. So, all right. So just a few things on masks. I think Amy talked about that as well. I think all workers should be wearing masks, and then requiring or requesting at least all your patrons that are indoors or too close. The key is it has to be covering the nose and mouth. I mean, I see so many food employees that throughout the day they get tired of wearing the mask and it's down over their chin or their nose is hanging out, and it's just ineffective. So it's up to you how you enforce it, but it really has to be fully covering the nose and mouth to be effective. And there's lots of websites and things about how to make the masks and different types. I was thinking that it may be useful for you to have all of your employees wearing the same mask. That way, the patrons can identify who your employees are, even if it's just by this bright red or whatever color bandana or mask they're wearing, just part of the uniform, basically. Next. And then finally, gloves. So Amy again talked about this. Gloves were a big thing at the beginning of this whole issue, but we know that gloves are just as bad at transferring the virus as dirty hands are. And so you really have to be careful about using gloves, and dirty gloves are worse than dirty hands in some cases, because people forget that the gloves are there to protect whatever they're touching and not necessarily their hands. The gloves aren't to protect their hands, it's to protect the surfaces you're touching from their hands. And so there's a lot of issues with gloves, but it's up to you whether or not you feel like your employees can do it well and not contaminate the gloves. Once you have a contaminated glove, it's doing nothing. That's really all I can say. I mean, the rest of it's on here, but is there a next slide? I think that, just some sources. So yeah, she mentioned it, a lot of the big box stores have bleach everywhere. Some of them maybe have limited amounts. Here's some other things that we know of that you can buy a lot of these chemicals from. A lot of them, especially if you have a food service of some sort, you're probably already familiar with many of the food contact sanitizers, but these are just some of the sites that we know have supplies, at least advertising supplies. I don't know what the shipping time is, and I don't know the answer to the question about masks outside. I think Amy mentioned earlier that you don't have to. There's no rule to wear them outside if you can stay more than 6 feet apart. But my personal opinion is that all of your employees should wear the mask, just because it makes the customers feel like you're doing everything you can to prevent them from getting it from your business. And of course, if your employees are walking in and out of places and near each other, then you're probably doing your due diligence to prevent them from spreading it to each other as well. But I don't know of any requirement that says you have to wear them outside.
The state is not requiring masks anywhere. They are highly recommending masks. Some counties are mandating masks, and I think you need to check with your specific county and the health department to see what the specific requirements are where there are mask mandates. But most of the information I'm seeing is that when people are outside and properly physically distanced, that there isn't necessarily a need for that, although counties can still, put the rules in place. Amy, does yours require masks outside over 12 or?
I believe she said no
yes,
earlier.
So Rutherford County follows the state recommendations. And so 13 and older are not required so long as you can social distance. So again, the vast majority right now for our crowd size, social distancing is easier. And it really is just going to depend. And that's at 6 feet. That's not 15 or 20 feet. I think the key question is going to be, what size crowds are you going to have at your property, and how far spaced are your attractions from one another? I feel like ours are spaced kind of at a good pace for a larger crowd. We intentionally tried to spread our crowd, but that was long before COVID. So that's all going to come into play as to how close everything is together.
Some operations have some things inside as well, gift shops, concessions inside, even restroom areas where you might need to have folks wear masks when they go in those places. Amy, are you experiencing that like in your shop area?
Yes. So if we have customers, the sign says if you're coming into the barn, you're supposed to put your mask on if you're 13 or older. In terms of enforcement, a lot of times that's also our exit way. So because we have a designated entrance and a designated exit. So if people are just exiting, they're walking through quickly, they're not going to be in the building long, I'm not going to stop them mid exit and say, hey, put your mask on. But if they're shopping and they're going to be hanging out for a minute and looking around, then if there are, especially if there are other people in the building at that time, then we do ask them to put it on. If they're the only customer in there, we haven't had a hard, we're not it's not a climate controlled building. So let me just state that. So when it's, feels like it's 100 degrees out, they're dripping sweat. So it's not been a big issue. Most people, when the mask mandate went into effect, they appreciated that we weren't forcing them to wear it across the entire property. I can't say that they're doing the best job social distancing. We have the signage to remind them, but we haven't gone through to every person that we've seen and said, you have to, have a hard line about it. In terms of there was another part to your question in the market. I will say we're adding an additional, what we always in the fall have a second exit, but that will be critical for us this year so that we don't have the large crowds inside that barn. We also have had an outdoor exit that we open in the fall. Of course, that cuts down though on your gift shop sales. So we're just prepared that, we'll push more pumpkins and things outside instead of inside this year.
Thank you. And thank you, Mark, for some really helpful information. We also have another question about should public restrooms be open at the farm? I'll weigh in here just a little bit. If you're having attractions, kind of like what we're talking about mostly here, then yes, I think you have to have public restrooms open or porta potties or something available and keep those well stocked and well cleaned and sanitized and disinfected for that. If you are having something where you're having online ordering and curbside pickup or something with very quick transactions, then I'm not sure that you have to have a public restroom. But yes, if people are coming to have an experience in the place, you're going to need those restrooms open, and there are no restrictions of having them closed, needing to have them closed. Any other speaker need to weigh in on that? Or any follow-up questions, please feel free to message me and we'll work on those. Okay. It is going to be really important how we communicate with customers this fall. I encourage you to use a positive tone. I think folks are glad to see some happy things and not all doom and gloom. So use a positive tone. Clearly communicate your health and safety protocols. What are you doing to keep your customers and employees safe? And, do that and have the information where they find it, but you don't have to keep hitting that over and over again. Necessarily make sure that those are available, but you don't have to post those every day on social media or something. Just communicate what you're doing and then go on with your business of doing it and providing your experiences for customers and communicating about things on the farm. We also need to clearly communicate expectations for those customers. Request that people visit another time if they've been sick or have come into contact with anybody who's had COVID in the last 14 days. Request that customers implement physical or social distancing. Describe any other procedures or protocols that you're having to do. Some businesses and places are doing temperature checks of customers. Some have mask requirements or recommendations. It's important to communicate those with customers so they know what to expect, so they can decide whether they're coming or not and know what to expect when they get there, so there's not any surprises that could start off their experience in an unpleasant way. It's really important through this time to maintain your brand consistency. So positive family fun. You have some great advantages in this with the open air and open spaces. And you also want to maintain your visibility. So be sure to get in front of folks. This is a great time to promote your story. Talk about the people who are involved. Talk about your farm setting, the open air, lots of acres to play and roam. The focus on your business. Tell your story about challenges faced over the years and triumphs that you've had. Just share your story. One speaker I heard recently said that consumers are looking for heroes, and we can make farmers our heroes. And certainly have been through the summer when it was hard to find products in the stores. People were going to the farm for food and to take care of their needs, and we can certainly help with some experiences and getting out and about and activities as well. Amy, anything you'd like to add about communicating with customers or your strategy of dealing with that and how it's been received by customers?
I think, you need to be prepared, or at least our process has been, we ask a health screening before they come through the visit, before they come through the gates, and we give them some instructions. So it's the recommended questions that the state provides in as part of the Tennessee Pledge. And then we also mandate that they have to sanitize their hands before they can enter the property. So we have sanitizing stations positioned there. But I think that everybody is kind of over it a bit. Let's be honest, the people who are out are the people who are no longer scared or who have decided they're ready to go out and experience something else. And that doesn't mean that we need to discount the seriousness of what's going on. But what that does mean is they don't want to be lectured. So when we are approaching them, we're very upbeat about it. And hey guys, I just need to ask you a couple of quick health safety questions, and be very light and nonchalant about it. Go through your questions and ask them. Because I think if you're going to take a hard approach with them, that's more of a turnoff. And they miss the smiles. I had a lady waiting, exiting the voting polls today, and I had taken my mask off and I smiled at her, and she said, "Thank you so much for smiling at me." And that is the same thing that people who are visiting our businesses long for. They long for, even though they're distancing themselves from others, it is just gives them a sense of normalcy. So I think taking a lighter approach instead of a hard approach when you're communicating with them, especially in person, is going to be much well received and appreciated versus the stickler, hardcore person.
Great thoughts. Yes, that positive, upbeat is consistent with the brands, and that's what they're there for, is to have a great time. And so you can be safe, but do it in such a way that is friendly to customers as well. We're glad to have Casey Troop with us from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture to tell us a few things about what they have going on that may be especially helpful during this time. Casey, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Megan. So like Megan said, I'm the business consultant for ag tourism at the Department of Ag. And I'm going to talk briefly about our Pick Tennessee Products Program and some state resources that are out there right now. So many of you know that Pick Tennessee Products is our free marketing platform. There's 3 ways you can reach it: through our website, downloading the app. If you've had the app on your phone for a while, make sure you go in and get the update. It came out a couple of months ago now, and it's got some updated categories on there that you'll want to be sure your app has. It's also on the new MyTN app as well. If you need to update your listing, you can email us at picktn@tn.gov at any time, and we will make any updates that you need for you. So on the next slide, we've got 2 examples of some things you may want to update on your listing. On the left here, we have Buchanan's Barnyard. Below their contact information, you'll notice that they have a link to their Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So I know a lot of people are using their social media right now to provide up-to-date information about what's going on their farm, any policy changes, hours of operation, things like that. So if your Facebook is not currently linked to your listing and you would like to add it, you can email us at that email and we will make sure it gets added for you. Another addition that we've been able to put on these Pick Tennessee products listings is your hours of operation. And we can do this by season. So you see a couple of different ways it's done here on both examples. We're able to title those seasons to what you would like it to be. So Boyd's Farm, you have the corn maze season. Buchanan's Barnyard talks about their festival. So we can name that specific to what you call it on your farm. Show the different months and the days and times within those months. And you can have multiple seasons listed on here if you would like. My one caution with this area is if you are going to be doing temporary hours specific for COVID or your hours change quite frequently, you do need to remember to let us know and to update those for you. With over 2,600 listings on the directory, it's hard for us to remember to reach back out to every farm and make sure they're up to date. So you'll want to make sure you're reaching out to us with any changes that need to be made to your listing. Some other things that we've had that you'll just notice on here is the Homegrown by Heroes logo. That's that blue logo down there on Buchanan's Barnyard. If you're a veteran or military, we are able to add that onto your listing for you. And then, of course, as always, we can list any available products that you have, what you offer. Another recommendation I have is if things are changing quickly on your farm or your hours might be different than normal, we can always put in the additional information, please call ahead before visiting the farm. That just gives your customer to know to call and talk with you first before just showing up. So why is it important to keep your Pick Tennessee products listing updated? We'll go to the next slide. This is a quick view of our website metrics and our Facebook. So just in the last month of July, our Pick Tennessee products website had over 27,000 visits and 76,000 page views. We're getting a lot of traffic to our website for people looking for local products. Our Facebook page is up to 35,000 likes. This is up almost 3,000 from a couple of months ago in April. And our posts are currently reaching 116,000 people and 27,000 people are engaging with our posts. That's a lot of interaction on our Facebook page as well. One thing we're doing right now to help producers, through our Facebook page, we're doing our Do Your Part with Pick TN campaign. This is where we're sharing those stories. So Megan talked about how important it is to share your story with the customer. Well, we're here to help you do that. You'll see an example we did back in April with Amazing Acres during their strawberry season. So with each profile, we share a little bit about the history of the farm, what they have available, what they're doing. And then we're also talking about what they're doing to do their part for Tennesseans. So you'll see there's a photo there of their drive-through strawberry service they started this year. We'll ask for a couple of photos, share your family, your face, and then your farm as well. If you are interested in having a producer profile done for you, email me and we can make that happen for you. I'll also be sending out an email next week about this to anyone who's on the Pick Tennessee products directory for agritourism, letting you know what we need from you. There's 3 quick questions we ask and then request some photos. So be looking for that email from me next week. All right, we'll go on to some resources that the Department of Ag has put together. Oh, that URL you see at the bottom, if you were to go to this webpage, which will include it along with all the other links that have been provided tonight, you will find all the resources for COVID-19. There is a prevention, monitoring, and management for agriculture settings booklet. You'll find a flyer and a poster, so they're the same thing, just at a different size depending on how you would like to display them on your farm if you choose. That has tips for farm operators and for farm workers. There's also some videos on there, frequently asked questions, ag industry guidance. So if you're a pick your own farm, you may have received a letter that we sent out a couple months ago that had specific guidance. So you'll find several copies for different industries within agriculture with specific guidance on this page, as well as links to other resources from our industry partners like the Center for Profitable Ag, USDA, Department of Health, and so on. All of the resources that I have in bold, so those first 4 will come in English and Spanish. So if you need a Spanish copy, for any reason, if you have some employees that are Spanish speaking, you can find both English and Spanish copies. And you'll see examples here of the flyer that is for tips for farm workers in both languages there. Okay. We've talked a lot about the Tennessee Pledge this evening. That is the URL you can find it. We'll include that in the resources as well. There are several guidelines listed on the Tennessee Pledge that you can pull from to help with your business, whether it be your concession stand, using the restaurant guidelines, your retail area, if you have on-farm lodging, the non-contact recreation guidelines will be helpful, events, and summer camps. So we have talked a lot about mask mandates and local. Make sure you are checking in with your local guidelines, though, for sure, about anything that is specific to your area. And then the last thing I wanted to share was a lot of you were asking about field trips, and this was mentioned briefly. I was able to find on the Tennessee Department of Education's page, they have put out recommendations for management of COVID-19 in schools. On page 3 of that document, they address field trips, where it says, schools should not plan in-person field trips, but are encouraged to plan virtual field trips where feasible. Plan to not have in-person field trips, and if you are able to provide a virtual field trip, whether that be through video, Zoom, where you can drop something off at the classroom, that is something that you may want to look into. I've got lots of friends who are teachers, and they are a bit overwhelmed right now with many of them just found out this week or last week what their school's plan is going to be, and it's different from each school district. So maybe give them a week or two, but field trips are not on the front of their minds, so you'll need to be the ones reaching out to them with some various ways that you could probably provide a field trip for them. We also mentioned the NAFTMA webinar Q&A session that happened earlier this week. They gave a lot of ideas on what farms across the country and in Canada are doing to adapt to this season. I emailed that out to anybody who is on our Pick Tennessee Products Agritourism directory this afternoon. I emailed out the recording of that session. If you did not receive it, that means you're not on my email list, or I may have an incorrect email for you, so you'll want to make sure to reach out and I can get that to you, as well as any of the other resources I'll be sending out.
And we'll put the link on the fact sheet as well that we'll email out about the NAFMA resources to the link to the webinar. And then they also had some notes including some other examples of products that people are using for cleaning and sanitizing and disinfecting, and other notes that could be helpful as well. So there's a publication for that. Thank you, Casey. Amy, we have been able to hear a lot of helpful information from you so far. What other final thoughts do you have for us that we may not have missed? And this is a great time for participants to put any final questions that you have into the chat box as well.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered most of everything that we've kind of put into place. I think everybody's going to be kind of different because the sizes and offerings of our operations are different. And I think the big takeaways are be flexible and try to make those decisions fairly quickly. And I think people are offering a lot of grace because they understand businesses are having to kind of jump through hoops and make all of these decisions. Especially early on, it was literally day to day. So it's also a good opportunity in a sense if you wanted to make some changes to your business. One of the things we've done is we cut a day off of we're normally open spring and summer Wednesday through Saturday from 10 to 5. So after COVID started, we weren't sure what to expect from numbers, and we knew we wanted to run on a really small crew. So we cut to only Thursday through Saturday. And we also, instead of 10 to 5, we went to 10 to 4. And worked really well for us. I actually think that employee satisfaction has gone up by just having the one extra day to do just farm chores and things like that around the farm. So that's been really good. Even though we did have a couple price increases for food, and I'm hoping that that's stabilized by now. You don't know, but we just went ahead and took a really big, took the opportunity to have a really big price increase when it comes to food across the farm. We hadn't had a large price increase in several years. And people understood. They're seeing their groceries be all over the place, so they can relate to that. So it gave us an opportunity to increase our revenues there, instead of being hit so hard by those rising costs. So I think those are some of the things, look for the opportunities in it. If there's something that you wanted to do away with at your operation, then perhaps this is the chance. And I hate to say use it as an excuse, but again, you get a little bit more forgiveness for those major changes that you're wanting to do right now. Let's see, Bart, I see we are offering pony rides. And what is our procedure? Jump pads and, okay. So pony rides. The pony rides are open. In terms of add-on activities, we offer those where they can buy them in advance before coming, but they can still buy those things here on site. So we certainly aren't turning
I lost you for a minute, Amy. Did anybody else lose her?
Okay. All right. So even before masks were mandated, our attendant there was wearing a mask for their own protection, because there is, a little bit of close contact. But when people enter that attraction, just like the wagon ride, we are spraying their hands with sanitizer, and if we can, we're having the parent put the child on the pony instead of the attendant. That way it reduces a little bit of contact there. But also when they exit the pony rides, they have to all have their hands sprayed again. If a customer doesn't want their hands or their child's hands sprayed with a sanitizer, then they cannot participate in that activity, because that's our policy, that's our rule for safety. So about I think it's every 30 minutes, at least every 30 minutes or every hour, the attendant sanitizes the horns of the saddle, because our saddles are leather, so you can't really sanitize the leather great, but we can put that disinfectant on the horns of the saddles and clean those once an hour. Same thing for our barrel train. Every other cart is empty. It gets a full spray once an hour, and before you can get on, and when you're exiting, your hands are sprayed with sanitizer. We've visited a couple of theme parks and parks across in Kentucky and in Indiana this year to see how some of the bigger places are doing it. And I think we're doing a whole lot more here than they are there. So I feel like that we're much more vigilant, and maybe our customers appreciate that a little bit more. Again, we've gotten lots of comments about how much they appreciate. I also think that there's a fine balance. I think that you can go overboard with your signage and overboard with the scare tactics and how you talk to people. So keep that in consideration, because you want to make sure that, again, the focus is on the experience, but you just want it to be a safe experience. In terms of the jump pad, we have not had the jump pad open yet this year. It's not COVID related. We normally don't have the jump pad open during our spring and summer season because of the heat. It's too hot. We do plan to open the jump pad this fall, and I think we'll just reduce the number that can be on it at one time. Some of the other farms that I've talked to that have already had their jump pad open, they basically are sanitizing it once a day at the end of the day. And that's probably the approach we would take. Some have anytime a child, I've heard one operator say anytime a child falls, by falling, I guess that would mean like their hands touch the jump pad, or maybe their face hits it, then they're spot cleaning it. But in general, most operators that I've talked to, they're only sanitizing their jump pad once a day, and that's at the end of the day. We do sanitation and cleaning at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day, but sometimes some of that is, most of the disinfecting is done at the end of the day in terms of heavy cleaning, heavy disinfectant, where they go around. We have backpack sprayers. We have sprayers on the back of the four-wheeler, and the crew goes through and cleans and then goes through and disinfects, sprays everything down. But in the morning, it's more of just cleaning the surfaces, wiping the surfaces down, because it's already been disinfected overnight, if that makes sense. And then there'll be routine disinfecting throughout the day. There was a product that we're going to consider, I think we are going to buy and try it, because we figure it's just an added layer of protection. And it's called Max Clean, MAXXCLEAN, and it's a multi-surface cleaner and sanitizer. It was recommended by some other folks out of NAFMA, and it's basically can be used on outdoor play equipment and wooden benches. It's things, a sanitizer that you apply once a month, and it has an antimicrobial, I guess, maybe Mark can explain this better, but basically it only has to be applied once a month. We're just using that as an added layer of protection for us for the fall. It is very expensive. It's $250 for a not very large bag of it. And then of course it has to be mixed up and at a correct concentration level. But it's what a lot of your towns are using on their playgrounds and that type of thing, your city parks, those types of things is so we figure if they're using it, then probably it's pretty effective and could offer us some good protection. Trying to think of anything else. Jason, can you think of anything else I haven't thought of to share? Nope. Yeah. I mean, I've tried to go along as we were going through stuff to cover it so we didn't forget it or it was on topic during that time. Certainly if there are any more questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Great. And we have a couple more questions that were submitted before the webinar, so we will continue with questions for a little while. For those who can stick around, I would appreciate if you would answer the poll here. That will help us in our grant reporting and some other things, so we appreciate you doing that. And I do want to thank all of our speakers for being here tonight, especially Amy and Jason and Casey and Mark for sharing all the information and resources that you have available. Somebody was asking about whether they could have whether events were limited to the daytime, and I am not aware of anything across the state that is limiting to the daytime, besides maybe bars and restaurants in Nashville. Is anybody else aware of anything that is limiting hours of operation?
No, we've held a prom in the evening here in the night hours. I've not seen anything in terms of, other than like what you mentioned out of Nashville, there are some restrictions, but that's specific to bars and restaurants there.
Very good. Somebody was asking whether there was any more further research come to light on the zoonotic possibility of cross-contaminations from humans to our farm species. The information I found on the CDC says that at this time there's no evidence that animals play a significant role in spreading the virus that causes COVID-19. based on limited information available to date, the risk of animals spreading it to people is considered to be low. We're still learning, but it appears it can spread from people to animals in some situations. So I hope that is helpful. Although scientists are still learning more every day about this particular virus. Are there any more questions?
Yes, I also.
Go ahead, Amy.
I was just going to say, I also, we had to, well, we didn't have to, but we participated in a webinar with USDA APHIS maybe 2 weeks ago. And they basically said the same thing that you're saying in terms of most of the contact that has been found is related to feline, the feline species. So in terms of farm animals, it's very little, minimal risk, so they were not overly concerned about that.
Thank you for sharing that. That is good to know. I have launched another poll. This is the first time I have used polling, so I appreciate your help in testing out this feature and gathering some data from you all for answering these questions. We certainly appreciate your time for being here. I will be sending an email to the email you registered with in the next day or two with a link to the slides and the recording of this session and a fact sheet with some of the links that we had shared. Feel free to reach out to any of us, but with additional follow-up questions or ways that we can help. We are here to help support you the best that we can through this, and look forward to seeing what all you do this fall and seeing people out there enjoying the open air and spaces and experiences that you all offer. I know tradition for some people will be especially sweet this fall if they can do that with you all. Thank you for being here. I will stick on here a few more minutes if anybody else has any other questions. If not, we'll talk to you soon. Stay well.